Today we're going to talk about CDN, and more in detail we are going through the do-it-yourself CDN, and I will explain how to set up a private or a do-it-yourself CDN in 5 simple steps. As usual, a little bit of introduction because you guys can't really see who is speaking. I'm sure many of you already know who I am, but for those who are new or for the people joining for the very first time a Varnish software webinar, my name is Arianna. I am a technical evangelist at Varnish Software, and we are caching and CDN experts. You can reach out to me on Twitter, and you can ask questions there, and then we can eventually move the conversation to more official channels. A couple of words about the company as well. I'm sure many of you have heard about Varnish Cache, and you know Varnish Cache is an open source web accelerator. Well, Varnish Software is the company behind Varnish Cache. We have been founded in 2010, and nowadays we have a few offices worldwide, London. I'm currently in Oslo. We have offices in Stockholm, New York, Los Angeles as well. We take care of developing Varnish Cache and a few enterprise Varnish solutions. And the do-it-yourself CDN is one of the 3 solutions we currently offer. Today will be mostly technical, so there will be no real commercial bits. But if you're interested in it, just feel free to reach out to me, and I will redirect you to the correct channel or correct person. So, as I said, today we're going to talk about CDN. What exactly is a CDN? So a CDN is a content delivery network. It's quite easy if you think about it. Just have a look at the graph here, and you will see we have an orange dot, and that's an origin server. That's where we generate content. Think about any regular website, really, e-commerce website. There is an origin server where the content is generated, and this content is then delivered, it is delivered in different points of presence. The green dots are the points of presence, and we're going to call them POPs for the rest of the presentation. And the arrows, they do represent the network. So basically, a content delivery network is a content which delivers network worldwide, and it's widely used by basically everyone owning a website nowadays. And it's used by everyone owning a website nowadays, and we actually have seen different trends in the CDN world. So like the regular CDN or the old version of the CDN goes back to mid-90s. So where a CDN was just a couple of storages, maybe one in the US and maybe one in Europe, and a cable really connecting those 2 storages. And it was used to just exchange information, and performance was not important at the time. Security was not mandatory really at the time either. It was just a way to exchange information faster without really using the regular either ship or boats or the regular mail. Throughout the years, after at the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000, and I will also say mid 2000, so 2005, 2007, internet became more available to pretty much everyone. And we also saw the growth of e-commerce, or more business will start using a website worldwide, and that's where we moved on to a multi-CDN approach. So it basically means that business and websites will use different CDN providers trying to reach different regions. Just to give you an example, if you have a website and you have business both in Europe and in China, most likely you're going to rely on 2 different commercial CDN providers to cover those 2 different regions. And that's because obviously you want your website to be performant no matter where your audience is from, no matter what you're using is connecting from, no matter the latency or the type of infrastructure you have in place. And slowly, after this multi-CDN approach, during the last possibly 3-4 years, no more than that really, we moved on to this do-it-yourself CDN or private CDN. And that's because, well, first of all, business have unique needs, demands and requirements, but also the market has changed quite a lot. So just to give you a few examples, why would you need a private CDN? So those are just 3 examples. Well, first of all, we have more content and we have more publisher. Just if you have a look, for instance, at Cisco forecast, they expect that by the end of 2021, we as user and business owners and content publisher, we will exchange something like 280,000 petabytes per month. That's a huge number. I can't really even picture that properly. And that's a trend the internet is currently seeing. I'm sure Cisco will most likely produce a little bit of more detailed forecast in the next year or so. Another example, much of this content is video related somehow. And I'm sure you have noticed the trend. Like throughout the last year, I think pretty much everyone is doing live streaming. We have a lot of video on demands. We have a lot of over-the-top streaming as well. And with the growth of video content, we also saw a trend of like video with better resolution. And I'm really talking about 4K, 8K, and 16K technology. So those are new technologies, and obviously the scope of those new technology is to improve the user experience. But it also comes with a cost, because if you have a 4K or 8K technology, it means you're going to have higher definition when it comes to video delivery, and higher definition is easily translated into more pixels, and more pixels really means more HTTP round trips, trying to render in properly the image, and we still need to be extremely performant and still need to deliver way more content than expected. And another example could be the long tail content. That's content which is not often fetched from the backend, and it's content which is usually very much user specific. Therefore, it's extremely difficult to keep the cache for. And those 3 are just 3 simple examples on why many companies and many enterprises have decided to go for a private CDN instead of purchasing a commercial CDN services. And again, if you got until this point, that's like a good overview of a commercial versus a private CDN. And you can really consider those 6 points. So if you're wondering if a private CDN will be a good fit for your business, just go through those 6 points and try, well, be honest with your answer. And at the end of those 6 points, you will be able to understand whether you could be happy with a commercial CDN or if you got to go down the private CDN road. Like out of those 6 points, I think the most important will be content control. Because if you think about a commercial CDN, so commercial CDN provider will obviously provide network, storage, services, servers, and they will sell those services to different websites, to different companies. And those companies will share the storage, will share the networks, and they won't really have 100% control over the content they're delivering. While if you bring back into each company the content control, like the sysadmin or the team or really anyone in charge for it in the company can follow the content from the very beginning. So from when it gets generated in the origin server until it gets delivered to the end user. And if you have better content control, it also means you gain in security, which is one of the hot topic nowadays, and it's really something you should consider, because like late 90s, security was not as important as it is today. Just think about, like, I'll think about GDPR, I'll think about the cloud bleed hacks, cloud bleed data leaks, or anything really like that. You want to make sure security is really one of your priority when it comes to content delivery. And at the same time, if you're able to control content and have full control over your workflow, you definitely gain in performance. We're living in times where 0.002 seconds can make a difference, can make really a difference for end user. So performance is incredibly important. And well, we have always been working in a caching scenario and a CDN scenario, so it's extremely important, and we have seen the urge from companies to have very good performance and also security and full content control, and at the same time also make the end user happy, which basically means user personalization and being always available. So that's pretty much the overview on why you will need, or why you might want to build your own private CDN. It's really up to you to understand if it's interesting for you or not. I've been working with customers who could also have decided to go for an hybrid solution, because it might very well be that you need services from a commercial CDN and you decide to integrate those services, building a private CDN as well. So it's really up to you. What we offer really can help you to build basically either 100% private CDN or a hybrid solution. Okay, let's get into the more technical part of the webinar and the 5 steps on how to build a private CDN for you. So first step, you have to decide if you want to deploy your CDN on bare metal or on cloud. Please, in your mind, just figure in your mind the slide where I was explaining what a CDN is. So the word with or origin server, a few pops and the arrows connecting the origin server with the points of presence. And you will have to decide if you want your CDN to be, again, on bare metal or on cloud. If you go for bare metal, it means the software you will run will be on premise. If you go for a 100% cloud solution, well, obviously you can rely on AWS, Google, and Azure platforms. We have images available on each of those three platforms. My personal suggestion for you will be, if you have to build a private CDN from zero, you have nothing, you have no server, no data center, nothing at all, just go for a cloud solution. Maybe combine 1, 2, or even the three different cloud providers, but just go for the cloud solution, because that's the current trend when it comes to big enterprise. But if you deliver gigabytes of content per second, then you probably will have to stick to bare metal, because you still, in the long run, is still going to be cheaper than actually buying machine on AWS or the Google platform. But those are very specific or corner cases, such as broadcaster, for example. But if you're just an e-commerce or any other website which sees less than 60, 70 gigabytes of traffic per second, you can go with a cloud solution, really. But it's pretty straightforward. You just need to sit and do the math and see what is going to be cheaper for you in the short and long run. Obviously, if you go for a cloud solution, you won't really need to have a full team of people running the sysadmin operations, while if you go for bare metal, you will have to maintain that. That's really part of the game. Once you have decided whether you want to go for bare metal or for a cloud solution, you will have to move on to the second point. So basically, at this point in time, we really have decided which kind of hardware we want to have. And now we need to understand how to connect the different points, how to connect the hardware we have or how to connect the cloud instances we have. And we're really talking about ISP and routing. So when it comes to ISP and routing, we don't really offer a solution. We're experimenting, obviously, because we know it's a problem, it's a common problem, because someone will have to, when we talk about CDN, you definitely need to have a network, and you definitely need to have internet which can shuffle bytes back and forth between one points of presence and another. And we definitely know incoming requests will have to be routed and eventually redirected to the closest points of presence. We're just experimenting with that a little bit, but I have a few tips. So especially when it comes to the internet service provider, I know you like cost control is extremely important, but if you think about that, if your website is not available because your internet service provider is not working as expected, the end user will most likely blame you as business owner. No one will ever think, oh, poor guy, the internet service provider they chose is not working, or they had an outage, it's not their fault. Most likely they will just blame you as business owner and eventually decide to move to another website or to something completely different. So cost control is important, but again, you will have to find a good balance, and you also need to consider the geographic presence of the internet provider, and at the same time, the routing service you want to go for. Connection speed, again, is extremely important, because you will have to find a good balance between upload and download speed. Again, because you want to deliver content and also upload content as well eventually, if you need to communicate to the backend. And it's really about finding the balance. There are many internet providers out there. I don't really feel like suggesting anyone, but just go for it and ask for trials, and make sure you know which kind of audience you have and which regions you want to serve, and pay attention to, especially to the region where other commercial CDN providers have the data center and where they have the network, because those are the most congested regions, and you definitely want to avoid that specific area, because you want to be faster than your competitor, and you want to be 100% available and reliable all the time. So at this point, once you know which kind of hardware you want to have and how to connect it, you basically have to decide where to place the origin server and where to place the POPs, the points of presence. So in this example, we have an origin server in the US, that's the orange dot, and then we have a few points of presence distributed worldwide. And the points of presence, again, they're really, most of the time, they're just caching instances. So the origin server originates the content, and the content gets distributed to the points of presence or the caching nodes, and then the caching nodes will take care of delivering content to the end user and to the end consumers as well. There are a few things you might want to consider when you decide where to place the origin server and your points of presence. Well, first of all, you want to know which kind of audience you have and where it is located. And most importantly, you need to do a little bit of forecasting here, and you need to understand where your business could be going in the next 2 or 5 years, and if you expect your audience to change, or if you expect to grow your business and reach different locations or different regions. You will have to measure the latency from your origin server until the end user. There is no quick way to do it. You just have to measure it and see, an example, how long it takes for a user sitting in Italy to get access to a piece of content which is generated in West Virginia or something like that. You will have to run a few tests, and and decide exactly where to place the location based on obviously your business strategy. And the third point will be to pay attention to traffic patterns. That's the most difficult one because you can expect to have peaks during specific periods of the year. Just to give an example, Thanksgiving week for an e-commerce website, that is usually an extremely busy week, and pretty much every e-commerce website expects to have peaks and have a lot of traffic during that specific week. But what's difficult to truly understand is, and you can't really predict it, is really the unexpected traffic. That's something you will have to consider, but that's as like we can probably apply some strategy there when it comes to actually implementing the caching nodes, and those will be points 4 and 5. But it's really, again, this part here, or deciding where to place your origin server and your points of presence, requires a little bit of testing. Doesn't necessarily mean you will have to travel all over the world, but you will have to sit in front of a laptop and send a few curl requests or get requests to different servers distributed worldwide, and try to understand which one under specific circumstances is indeed performant. So at this point, we have decided if we want to go for a hardware or a cloud solution. We have decided where to place the origin server and the points of presence, and how to connect origin server and the different points of presence with a specific internet provider. So what we really need right now is just the software part, and more specifically, we need to understand which kind of solution we want to have for each of the points of presence. And we usually suggest to let the points of presence do the caching. So they can serve a copy of the originated content and be extremely performant. And you can just install Varnish on each of your points of presence, and that's really straightforward. Those lines have been copied and pasted from our documentation. So we give you a token or a password, and you get access to this package cloud repo, and you will just have to install the Varnish Plus version. And that's how you install Varnish and all the piece of software you will need to run a CDN and to deliver content from your points of presence. The interesting part is obviously point 5, and that's where we run when we get into the configuration bits for each point of presence. So that's a CDN really. Let me explain that. We have origin servers, we have a network, and this network obviously have a few incoming requests, and then we have 1, 2, and 3 different points of presence. These points of presence over here, it acts as a caching node, but it is also shielding the origin servers. That's because the origin servers generates the content, and you need to protect it. So Varnish will actually take care of taking incoming requests and making sure everything is fine, and then it will just reduce the strain on your backends and make sure that we reach out to the backends if and only if necessary, or only if we need to fetch new content. And then we have a couple of points of presence, and they do act as caching nodes and really nothing else. For each of these cluster, we have 2 Varnish instances running with MSE. MSE stands for Massive Storage Engine, and you can start Varnish either using a malloc storage, but that's in memory, which basically means that if you restart Varnish or if Varnish crashes, you will lose the cache. While if you go for MSC, you have the persistent option. And again, that's extremely important, because if you run a CDN, most likely you are caching gigabytes of content, or content you don't really want to lose over restarts. And at the same time, MSC has been studied to accommodate big data set to be cached. So we're talking really about gigabytes and terabytes of content. Those two Varnish nodes are in high availability using Varnish high availability. And this provides consistency and availability, obviously. That's because if one of the two Varnish instances dies or crashes or it's under maintenance or really anything else, the other one can still reply and fulfill incoming requests. That's to make sure your business is always available and can always fulfill incoming requests from different clients, really. So at this point, if you look at this graph, all we need to do really is we need to, once we have installed Varnish, we need to start Varnish using MSC instead of malloc. We need to install Varnish high availability, and we need to make sure Varnish can listen to incoming requests, and that will happen on port 80, and also talk to the backends. So it's either from this Varnish to this cluster or from this cluster to the backends. And that will, in my example, it will happen on port 8080, but it's really up to you, or it really depends on which port your backend is listening on. So if you have a look at this slide, to configure Varnish, you really need to ask yourself, can Varnish talk to your backend? If you can talk to your backends, then the next question would be, can Varnish listen to incoming requests? If the answer is yes, then you're all set, then you can just test your CDN and make sure everything works as expected. If your answer is no, you will have to set up your backend and the listening part for Varnish. So first of all, we make sure Varnish can talk to a backend. And when you install Varnish, it comes with this default VCL. And if you open it, you can define to which backend Varnish is talking to. In this example, we have the backend defaults, and Varnish talks to this specific host. Well, that's your web server name or the IP address as well. And it communicates on port 8080. And we also want the connection to be secure. Hence, we have an SSL option set to 1. So basically, Varnish will talk to your web server on port 8080 using a secure connection. And now Varnish is able to reach out to the backend and fetch content from each backend. The next step will be to let Varnish know on which port it is supposed to listen to incoming requests. And that's part of the startup options. Again, when you install Varnish, it comes with this Varnish file. That's under etc default for Ubuntu and the system configuration for EL6 and 7. And among the daemon options, we need to set this -A to 80. So Varnish will listen to incoming requests on port 80. And since we're working on the startup options, I told you we would have used MSC storage instead of a malloc storage, and that's exactly what we do here. So we let Varnish know that it will have to, as storage, it will have to use an MSC storage using a specific, that's a path for the store, and the content will be stored on disk. And that's a path for the book. The book takes care of indexing the content. So if Varnish gets restarted, on restart Varnish, we use this Varnish/MSC/book to reindex all the content and repopulate the cache. So you won't have really any downtime at all. So at this point, Varnish can listen to incoming requests, can communicate with the backends, and Varnish is using also an MSC storage. The next and final step will be to set up Varnish high availability. And from command line, you will have to run this VHA generate VCL. We'll give you a token again. You use a token, And this VHA generate VCL, it's a VHA specific VCL, will generate a VHA specific VCL based on your very unique configuration. And the VCL which is generated will have to be included again in your default VCL file. So at this point, we have an internet provider, we have incoming requests. Varnish is perfectly capable of listening to those. It's fetching content from the backend because it can talk and it can communicate with the backends, and it will store content using this MSC storage and make sure the two different nodes are consistent and fully synchronized using VHA. And that's really all you need to set up a CDN. Just to recap before we go into this the Q&A, you will have to decide if you want to go for bare metal or for a cloud solution. You need to understand and decide where to place your origin servers and your points of presence, which kind of network you want to have or you want to use to deliver content and exchange information between the origin servers and the points of presence. Install Varnish and configure it. To configure it, you will just need to go through the last 4 slides or so I've presented. So that's really pretty much it. It's something that most likely, if you go for a cloud solution, might take up 2 hours or for a proof of concept takes a few hours, no more than that, really. So if you have any questions now, you can type like in front of you, and I can actually show you that. You have a question panel, and you can type your question in there, and I will answer to those. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so I guess there are no questions. I'll wait an extra minute. So the question is high availability the only difference between Varnish Cache and Varnish Plus? So the solution we offer, it's called do-it-yourself CDN. And so Varnish Cache provides only caching with malloc. So the answer is no. In our solution, you will get MSC, high availability, and well, I haven't mentioned, but secure connections is another interesting bit for anyone running a CDN. So I will say no. The answer is no. High availability is not part of the open source version. The open source version only provides caching with a malloc storage, and that's it. Anything else is part of the do-it-yourself CDN solution we offer. Let's see if there is anything else. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for listening in, and have a nice afternoon or morning. It really depends in which part of the world you are. Thank you very much. Bye.